So my name is Louise Haagh, and I'm Danish, but I've lived in the UK for 30 years. And I think my perspective on basic income, as well as on the relationship of basic income with social problems, social development, is very much shaped by this comparison of the Danish and the British form of society. I became interested in basic income. I first heard about basic income in Brazil in 2001 or 2002, I think. I was visiting the house of Eduardo Suplicy. I was interviewing him about Bolsa Familia because I was conducting research on basic income programs or basic income-like programs in developing countries at the time. And he was very insistent to explore or explain the concept of basic income to me. And I was immediately very much taken by the case for basic income. It seemed obvious to me. I had been doing research in Chile before that. Chile, of course, was the first country to implement the neoliberal model of development. And it struck me that there was something very inconsistent about the model, which was the presumption that individuals would be available in the flexible labor market, but there was nothing to sustain them to enable this flexibility. And so in my PhD, in my book that I published subsequently, I developed a concept called occupational citizenship, which was the idea that to belong to society and to evolve as a human being, it's important to have a purpose in life. And occupation is a form of purpose in life. But not only that, society has a duty to try and shape opportunities for individuals to live a life that's stable and meaningful, purposeful, and fulfilling. And in the case of Chile, the neoliberal labor market model made that an individual responsibility in a way that was destructive for human development. And so when Dr. Suplicy told me about basic income as a guarantee of subsistence, as a support of freedom and economic security, I thought it was not only very necessary, but it was a missing piece in the economic development model at that time. And since then, I have been a cautious supporter of basic income, which means I support basic income, the principle. I think it's modern society, large societies, people have lost the means of subsistence and in order to guarantee a dignified life. Basic income is no different to me than other rights we grant unconditionally, healthcare, education, and in general the welfare, the universal welfare state. So for me, basic income is just an element, a natural element, a natural progression of the commitment to universal welfare. It's the one thing that we failed to do in the post-war, when we set up the post-war welfare state, is to give a guaranteed right to subsistence. Yes, sure. I think what's happening now is that basic income is moving from being a philosophical idea to becoming an institutional proposition. And once it becomes an institutional proposition, it's very important to make the switch from what I think has been a tendency in basic income debate, which is to make basic income answer all manner of problems and a philosophy of its own, which I think it cannot be. Basic income fits as an element in a broader conception, to my mind, of human development and what human development requires in terms of justice. So once we move from basic income as a big philosophical idea to being an institutional proposition, we need to be more delimited and realistic in terms of what we claim for basic income. And I claim for basic income that it is an element in human development justice, but it doesn't answer all problems. In a book that I'm writing at the moment, I argue, and I've said it before, that we don't need basic income experiments to make the case for basic income. Okay. And why is this? Well, first of all, I've already given reasons why basic income is just, and is no different from healthcare, the commitment we have to universal healthcare and universal education. We don't need to prove anything, at least in the most developed societies in terms of welfare, in order to access healthcare. We don't need to prove anything in order to access universal education. Why should basic income be different? And I say this because I see basic income as constitutive of human development in the same way as I see healthcare and education as constitutive. So in that sense, we don't need a basic income experiment. And in many ways, proposing the idea that we need one in order to see how people will behave, to my mind, is potentially destructive. However, I think there are positive aspects to basic income experiments and pilots if we put it in the right way, in the right context. But I think, again, one has to be very careful, especially in the context of some of the recent government-initiated programs. There's a great deal of emphasis on observing people's behavior, which to my mind sets a sort of condition on the claim for basic income, which shouldn't be there. And it certainly shouldn't be a case of proving that people are able or willing to work in the labor market such as it is, because we know the labor market is unjust such as it is. Again, a very good question. I don't think it's possible to give a universal answer to that. I do think, in light of what has happened in the last couple of years globally, which, as I see it, is a reaction to globalization, it takes some ugly forms, populism, quasi-fascism, nationalism. However, I also think it takes some positive forms, this reaction to the global marketization project, which is it's a looking inward for democratic solutions at the local level. So in that context, I think, although many people have explored basic income as a global solution, and of course it is a form of global justice, I accept that, I think what we're looking at now is local level experimenting, by which I don't mean pilots as such, but actual areas of public administration, municipalities taking it into their own hands to experiment with providing income security unconditionally on a different basis. So I see the future or the next steps very much in terms of local democratic experiments. Actually, I think the negative income tax and basic income are actually not so different. It is true that different philosophies have been attached to these two propositions, but in terms of the financial implications, there need be no real difference. And in terms of conditionalities, there is no real difference. So it's really a technical difference. Yes, they do, but I understand why, and I'm very sympathetic to their concerns. I worked in the past with labor unions in Denmark, and my research has been on labor unions in different places. So I understand the concern from the labor movement. I understand the concern from social democrats. I happen to think they're wrong. But one of the reasons they have the concerns they do is because of the way we have presented the basic income proposal. I think in the past we have presented the basic income proposal in a way, intentionally or unintentionally, it was put as a contrast to the universal welfare state. It's the universal welfare state or basic income. It's basic income or structures of solidarity and social security. And labor unions have been cast as agents of the past, representing interests of the past. I think that's wrong. I think labor unions represent human interests in control of work. And therefore, the concerns that they have, the institutions they have built, they may not be perfect from the point of justice, are very important, and they represent the same democratic values as those who defend basic income defend. So in order to meet these objections, what we need to do is to change the way we argue for basic income. Difficult to say. I think, again, this is tricky. Because for many years, because basic income has been a foreign idea in many ways, the tendency has been to present it as radical, to present it as a revolutionary step, to present it as something that's going to transform society. And it's understandable that proponents have wished to present it this way. But I think it is problematic in two ways. I think empirically it's wrong. I don't think basic income will transform society, certainly not in the short term. But I do think that basic income will play a very substantial role in enabling transformation of various other kinds. So it's a small but very important and very valuable reform, and that's how I see it. The danger with attaching too many objectives to a basic income reform are several. One of them is we might be disappointed. Okay. Number two, we might underestimate the other challenges we face in terms of how to reduce inequalities, how to promote human development, how to promote equal standing in social relations, how to promote ecological justice. None of these things are going to be resolved by a basic income directly. A basic income sends a signal that human beings deserve security and that security is a motivating factor. A signal that is valuable for how we think about other institutions, how we think about going about organizing production work in the future. But a basic income is not going to solve these things on its own. It's merely one step in the right direction. Yes, certainly, yes. But again, I need to say but, because I worry that too much is expected of basic income, especially when we think about basic income as a solution to poverty, which has become quite a well-known way to argue for basic income at the present time. We used to think about basic income as freedom promoting. And in my case, I used the term human development freedom. But more recently, there has been more of an emphasis on a redistributive perspective, and especially on an anti-poverty agenda, which is fine. But I don't think this is the first or most important achievement of a basic income. I think it's a secondary effect, which is important, of course, to alleviate poverty. The concern is that people who live in poverty, whether you define it as income or opportunities or so on, will still be in poverty with the basic income. Why? Because poverty is about more than having enough to live on. It's also about being able to live a fulfilling life, to have equal social relations, and to control your destiny within society. So I do worry when people say basic income will unleash creative potentials, because I think more than basic income is needed to reform our societies in a way that all human beings have real opportunities. I think a sense of justice, and a sense that, especially as a woman, I think, women absorb the pressures of society. Women live dual lives. I have 2 children, which I have brought up in difficult circumstances. And the lack of knowledge that there is something, independent of my employment, independent of my family relations, which are in different countries, that I can count on, is personally for me, a sense of justice that is missing in contemporary society. But not just for me. I think if there's one thing that we can fix, and there's a lot of things that are difficult to fix, but if there's one thing we can fix relatively easily, and that will make a common fate of individuals who feel, I think, lost in the global transaction economy, be it as a woman, a mother, or for other reasons, it is this thing. It is basic income.